Happy to be here. So I'm Shawn from Solomon Partners, and I have Luke here joining me today. And I've known Luke for many years and fortunate to sit with him today and talk about his first year at Ferrovial and how he sees the future transplanting. So Luke, maybe we start with just a little personal background for yourself. You're relatively new to Ferrovial, but obviously you've been in the sector for many years in a number of high profile spots. So maybe just if you give a little background on how you arrived at Ferrovial.
Thanks, Shawn. It's good to see you again. Yes, we have indeed been working in different situations together over many years. So thank you for seeing you again. So my background, I've been in aviation for my whole career, and neatly half of my career has been with airlines and the other half in airports. And have been worked in airport infrastructure since 2005 across many investors and airport strategics, and been with Ferrovial now for 16 months. I had a busy 16 months and looking forward to the future.
Yeah, excellent. Luke, maybe just a little bit of background as well on the Ferrovial portfolio. I think we're going to touch on some of your newest acquisitions, but maybe just if you step back, the portfolio you came into when you joined 16 months ago, and just overall the strategy for Ferrovial Airports.
Yeah. So Shawn, I mean, Ferrovial is very, very well known in the airport investment world. Has been over 24 years now investing in airports, and over that time have held stakes in over 30 airports, which is quite amazing. The most famous, clearly in 2006, when they acquired a large stake in BAA. I joined in June last year, and at the time we had and still have the 25% stake in Heathrow, a 50% stake in AGS, and over that last 16 months, we have acquired a 60% stake in Dalaman Airport and a 49% stake in JFK Terminal 1. So look, in terms of our focus, look, we got an outstanding team here, and a team that has worked extremely hard over the years trying to compete for investment opportunities in airports. And pre-COVID, it was an extremely crowded market with many investors, from financial investors, sovereign wealth funds and pension funds and strategics, all clamoring over opportunities. The world's changed. World's changed for an obvious reason, and I think the investment market has changed with it. I genuinely believe that the asset class has moved up the risk curve, and I think the usual players that we've seen in the market probably have taken a different view around that. We've seen that as an opportunity, and with those two acquisitions that I've mentioned over the last 12 or so months, we have looked at those opportunities on a bilateral basis and trying to position ourselves to acquire airports in a different way. So that's our outlook. We're still open to other opportunities, and we'll likely seek them in the same way. That's the plan. It's an unstructured approach. It's not a usual process where an auction with a start, middle, and end. It's very much about trying to create your own opportunities.
Yeah, that's excellent. Luke, I think we're going to spend a lot of time diving into the airport specific investments, but just before we go there, how do you think about things in the aviation space outside of airports? Is it strictly airports you're focused on, or are there related services businesses that are of interest?
Look, the example with JFK is a terminal. So we've moved away from looking at the whole precinct to terminals. We would definitely look at opportunities in the cargo space and other infrastructure-related aviation businesses, but wouldn't go into the services end. So we are very open to opportunities that have an aviation link, but clearly have to have an infrastructure connotation to that rather than services.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So in terms of the two new acquisitions, from the outside, they're very different assets, and both different in geography, different in size, different in airline makeup, and so forth. So, how do you see? I want to dive down into each of the investment thesis with them, but just from the two together, how do you see them fitting into your overall portfolio?
They are very different geographies, different markets, but we have a fairly broad strategy and focus for what we're looking for. And if I take two of them separately and sort of talk about the attractiveness of both, one, Turkey as an aviation market is very attractive and has shown, very, very strong growth very sustainable, strong growth over many, many years. And if you look at Dalaman as an airport, it is very much a tourist airport. We think there is, strong demand for O&D, or continue to be strong demand for O&D leisure airports. Dalaman Airport is, at the height in 2019, touching 5 million passengers, and obviously dropped through COVID, recovered very, very strongly. It has enormous capacity, and it's quite an undeveloped region that has strong desires to grow in terms of its offering with accommodation and other activities. So for us, it's growth. It's in a market we think that in aviation terms has a lot of growth, and it's leisure. So it ticks those boxes. You go to the other side with JFK, well, it's in a market that is extremely mature market, but in the US's largest international gateway. It has an opposite issue to Dalaman, where it's heavily constrained, particularly in terms of wide-body gate capacity. It doesn't have the same level of infrastructure quality that we see around the world. So the objective there is to, one, provide additional capacity, two, to provide far better quality and service, but three, to do it in a market and in an environment where we think it is beneficial not only to the airport customers but to the community, which is a really important point as well. Building a 240,000 square metre terminal in southeast Queens needs a lot of cooperation and collaboration with the community, and that's something that we are very much focused on. With our partners, with the grantor, the Port Authority, and that is something that we're very excited and passionate about, and really utilising the experiences, the good and the bad, in developing airports over many, many years. And the plan is for JFK Terminal 1 to be Skytrax's top 10 terminal. So that's the plan, and that's the focus, and hopefully have that delivered in mid-2026.
Yeah, it's a massive, massive undertaking. And Luke, you've come into it relatively recently as well, and the project was started before you came into it. Maybe can you give a little bit of background on how you arrived into the project and how you see that developing with the partners that were there both before and after you?
It falls into the same philosophy and the strategy I mentioned earlier about creating your opportunities. And it was a conversation between myself and Pete Taylor from Carlisle. You join a job as you do, and you get your Rolodex out, and you call all your contacts, and hey, is there an opportunity somewhere? And right time, right place. I think Shawn and Pete and the team at Carlisle did a phenomenal job to bring this project up to that development phase. I mean, it's an enormous undertaking. It's not just about designing a structure at Terminal 1 and negotiating with the Port Authority. Is so much more than that. Politically, community, as I mentioned earlier, and gathering the other co-shareholders together, it's enormous. So they did an incredible job bringing it to that level. I think Pete and the Carlisle team realised that it's probably time now in the execution phase to bring a strategic in, and also a construction arm, or in our case, we're providing the PMO, but an investor that has that capability to oversee the construction. So timing was good for us. I think timing was good for them. It was important for us to keep Carlisle in the consortium. They had a lot of history, so they still remaining in the consortium. So that's how it came about. A lot of discussions early on. We were attracted by many things, but one thing in particular was the partners. You invest in any jurisdiction, and it doesn't matter whether it's Turkey, the UK, or New York. Having local partners for us is critical. And we have the aviation construction capability. We don't have that local knowledge and experience and influence that you need to make this project successful. And in JLC and Ullico, they have that. And JLC is a minority-owned infrastructure company with, strong experience right throughout the United States, but particularly in New York. And Ullico is the union labor life insurance company that provides the pensions for the construction workers that are responsible for delivering our amazing facilities. So to have that group of partners for us was extremely attractive. So we broke ground in September, and so far so good with progress. So fair ways to go, but it's all going well.
Yeah, I love it. You coming into a new job and come out swinging on one of the world's biggest stages. So
well, it's a fair bit of luck, Shawn. A bit of luck, a bit of good measure. But look, it's coming into Ferrovial and turning up to the board and asking them to write checks of those sizes was a good effort. But that's not just me; it's the entire team, and good support from my boss, of course. But it's also coming with a compelling point around why we think these are good assets and why we think we can actually add value. And clearly, we demonstrate that Ferrovial is still positive about the aviation industry and about the prospects of that. We are quite selective, so we don't take the view it's rivers of gold everywhere. And it's definitely not rivers of gold. It's hard work that gets you to your investment thesis. But we're still positive about the future of aviation.
Yeah, Luke, I think it's a really interesting opportunity to sort of bring together the rather unique composite skills that Ferrovial has. You mentioned the construction experience. Obviously, you know how to invest in airports and run airports. Is that composite like a big part of your focus going forward? I mean, when you look to new opportunities, how do you think about bringing that collection of skills?
Yeah, it's a different experience that I've had at Ferrovial and the other investment firm that I've worked for. And it is a very a collegiate approach here. So it's not only the construction side, it's the experience of the Central team, the roads team have collected, and we seek their advice on a whole lot of stuff, and finance and legal and HR at the group level that all have a major input to the success of what we do and of the investment case that we put together. But where we have quite a competitive advantage, particularly with the construction guys, is the flexibility. So it's not as if we go into these projects and go, we must be the design builder. We can in some cases, but in other cases, we're quite comfortable taking a PMO position as we have done in JFK. So for us, we look at every opportunity to obviously give us a view on how we can deliver on it. So, the executable approach is critical, and having the other areas of Ferrovial to be able to support us on that, and not just in the due diligence phase or in the development phase, but actually in the execution phase, has been extremely helpful for me and our team. But it's really shown that the value of Ferrovial as they work as a group is really impressive.
Yeah, it is really impressive. Luke, you earlier mentioned that the JFK opportunity is just a terminal. It's not a whole airport. And particularly at JFK, where you have constrained facilities, or you have for a while, there's other terminal projects underway. In some ways, your project is unique in that it has on-airport competition, which you don't often see in investment opportunities. How do you think about that dynamic in this situation?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So it's very different when you look at your catchment area in a typical airport, and you look at where's the closest airport and look at the competitive environment. I mean, JFK, as an airport, competes with Newark, right? So it does compete with other airports in terms of long haul traffic, but the real competitors are the other terminals, and in the future it'll be only 3 terminals and not, it'll be 4 terminals, not 6 terminals, but there's real competition there. So we're acutely aware of that. That's why we need to provide the best product, for the most competitive price, and be able to, attract and retain airlines, because, there are switching costs for airlines, but as we know, airlines move around terminals and airports all the time. So it's important for us to provide that product that we think is going to be attractive. But the point you made earlier around is that first foray into airports in the US. It's not the first foray into investments in the US, and Sintra has quite a big stamp on toll roads in the US. But for us, we see this as a beachhead for other opportunities, and I think we need to prove ourselves and demonstrate to the P3 world in the US that private investors can add value, can not only add value to the airlines and the public that use the airport, but the public and the community around them, and can actually also be very inclusive. So the NWBE targets are serious and something that we are absolutely committed to. And we think that's important, not just for this project, but for our future projects, to demonstrate that, one, we take it seriously, and two, that we can actually achieve them. So that's something that we have set our minds on throughout that whole project. So it's we see the US market as a strong market in the future. I know it's quite challenging and has been for many years, and that's where you and I first met back in 2008 on an infamous transaction in Illinois. But we think it's important that, and I think it's important for all airport investors or infrastructure investors in airports, for this to be a success. And if it is, and hopefully it leads the way for other opportunities, and the market, meaning that the communities and the users of the airport can see that this is the future.
Yeah, certainly want to get into the U.S. market a bit more, Luke. But just before we go there, one of the other interesting dynamics with you coming into JFK was it's a time where the capital markets are fastly evolving. And I imagine your financing plans change throughout that sort of diligence process. How do you think about that in the current environment, being able to do such a massive project in the current environment? And, how do you see that going forward in the near term?
So we got to financial close in early June. Would like to have been in early January, but it was in early June. And Carlisle did a phenomenal job bringing banks along right throughout the journey. So this is not, didn't knock on the doors of the banks in early June and say you want to come aboard. So this is a culmination of a lot of work. But markets did change quite dramatically in the months and weeks that led up to financial close. We secured a $6.5 billion senior debt facility, 5-year facility then, and we had enormous support, which is, I think it indicates the strength of the credit and also the sponsors. And we subsequently successfully syndicated as a bank syndication with over 30 lenders. So, even despite the current markets being very, very difficult, I think it's a reflection on the credit and that also on the sponsors. So, look, I think we've got we've got some time now to consider our options going forward. But it's the timing could have been better. But I think given the fact we got it away with such support, it was terrific. Yeah,
it's gonna be fun to watch. Luke, let's talk a little bit about the U.S. broadly. You mentioned JFK being a beachhead for you all. I know you set up an office here in the U.S. A couple of years ago. Obviously had looked at various opportunities, and you mentioned the Illinois project, that 2 rounds of Midway, obviously St. Louis in 2019, and various other things we could talk about. But in terms of going forward, how do you see bringing the Ferrovial sort of skill set to the U.S. market, and where do you really see the most opportunity?
So the 2 other deals you referred to, Midway and St. Louis, didn't proceed for different reasons, as you know.
Yep.
So for us, the skill set that we have, clearly aviation skill, experience, and construction. We are, through this experience in development of JFK Terminal 1 will give us further experience. But I can't stress enough, as I mentioned earlier, having that local content, that local relationship to help us through is vital. So there's no secret recipe on how we're going to unfold it. All I'll say, Shawn, is that we are very focused on, first and foremost, making JK1011 a success for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. What's the cunning plan after that? It's really to I think we got as an investor, but also as a community of investors in airports, we do need to do a lot of work on convincing the right people and the right groups on the benefits. So I think just knocking on a door of a municipality or a city or a state and say, hey, we're here, we got the money, we can do it, it just doesn't work like that. So there's a lot of thought we need to move around that. But to simply answer your question, we're really keen on more opportunities. Where they are, where it's going to be, how big is it, big or small, we haven't sort of worked through that as yet. But as I said, this won't be our first and last airport investment in the US.
Yeah, one of the hallmarks, Luke, of since I've known you, I think more so than some others, is you've always prioritized the airline relationships, and maybe that's your background, maybe that's you've learned your lessons. I don't know. You can speak to that, but to me, one of the keys to success in the U.S. market, well, all markets, but particularly the U.S., the way the airport investments are structured, is understanding how the airline dynamic, if you will. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your perspectives on how you balance that airline relationship.
Shawn, I think your assessment's right. I mean, I worked for airlines for 17 years of my career at airports. So I was the one that was battling on the other side. And, I worked for Virgin Blue and, had a very public battle with the employer after that, which was Macquarie, which I'm sure you can all Google search. But in all seriousness, and this is just not something that just rolls off the tongue easily, is that, what we do as an airport, we serve our customer is at the airlines, right? And there's no point in building and constructing and developing and putting an infrastructure like a terminal together that you think is right for you, but not right for your customer. It's critical. And but the reality is, it's always difficult. It's difficult to please everybody, but I think you need to sound your customers and keep that dialogue going, because their demands and their needs change, and you need to create that flexibility that can deal with that. The relationship in the development phase of when you're developing or remodeling a terminal is critical in many ways, but also facilitating and supporting them on their growth is just vital. And we can do that in many, many ways through capacity or everything from way signage to technology and innovation, and to give them the ability to improve their customer service, which grows their traffic, which grows our revenues. So I have always prioritized that. Has our industry always thought that was a priority? Probably not. But I think our industry's grown up in terms of our airport investment industry has grown up and realised that is important. And relationships and communication at the operating and the working levels and airports have improved enormously since I entered many, many years ago. But there's still a fair ways to go.
Yeah. Luke, you mentioned earlier about your views on airport investments moving up the risk curve. And so as you think about sort of the global opportunities, maybe can you share some thoughts on how you see the role of strategics within the global sector playing out? Like, is it increasing in importance, and how do you see that role of a strategic, whether it be on your own, because you're obviously a large organization, can do the biggest projects in the world, or through partnerships?
Well, our two investments in the last 12 months have been with partnerships. But if you look at the investments over the last 2 years in airports, they're largely been strategics, right? And then if you go back pre-2019, there's been a lot of investments with just financial investors. So I think that's changed in the sense that financial investors, whether they're sovereigns or pension funds or pure financial investors, I think the view was rivers of gold. Look what's happened over the last 20 years. I can go to my investment committee and say, they've done it, why can't we do it? I don't think anyone anticipated pandemic. No one had it in in their sensitivities on what happens when traffic goes to naught for a very long time. I'm sure that will be a demand from many investment committees on, well, how would you deal with that, and how does your returns cope with that scenario? But I think what it's taught us is that you need to have quite a sophisticated view on your traffic growth and how you can actually sustain that in difficult times, and not only in pandemics, but in potential downturn that we may be facing over the next few years with an economic crisis. So look, strategics have always had a role to play, and very early on in this century, it was really strategics leading the way with some financial investors, because strategics didn't have the money, and that would, the support of the check was through financial investors. Then that just morphed into financial investors, pension funds, and sovereign wealth funds. I think we're sort of going back to the early 2000s in terms of that. So I'm not saying that there's no room for non-strategics. I think there absolutely is, but I think the strategics, the ones that have emerged out of this, is still focused on this sector as being an investable asset class.
Yeah.
But at a high risk, and I genuinely believe that, and I think every airport in every jurisdiction in every segment has moved rapidly up. I think some have moved somewhat up, but others have moved more up, and we've just seen that. And I think you can just look at the recovery, which airports have recovered better than others, sort of gives you an idea of the less risk versus the more riskier airport.
Certainly can see the haves and the have-nots through that environment.
Yeah.
Look, in terms of the role of strategics and the sophistication sort of requirement increasing, you mentioned traffic and being able to understand the dynamics in a pretty complex world. I suppose one of the other roles going forward is the understanding technology and how that may affect the operation. Maybe can you share some thoughts about how Ferrovial is looking at technology, whether it be to affect staffing or efficiencies or customer service? Like, what things do you see on the horizon that are perhaps opportunities, but just add to the complexity of managing an airport?
I think it actually goes beyond technology and broader innovation, but also sustainability. And I think that is an element where I think sustainability in the ESG point pre-COVID was a bit of a tick box, and I think that's now become more serious, and I can talk about that a little bit later. But look, innovation and the technology has been something that airports have needed to move to, and have moved to quite well over the period, and it's gone from everything from from kiosks to bag drops to facial recognition, through security and immigration to boarding. And I think that's the demand for that has been both airport led and airline led as well. So it's been a combination of both. A lot of it is around efficiency for the customer. I think that's where it's come from. But secondly, it does enhance, in some cases, security and safety. But it's always something that will continue to grow with the and a lot of it is led by financial efficiency and operational efficiency. But you'll find that a lot of the stuff that we do at airports is to create a better customer experience, right? And I think that's fundamental. And a lot of airports are following that, whether it's being able to order a hamburger at your gate or whatever. I think that's something that will continue on. But on the sustainability side, and I think that sort of comes to the point around strategics, is that when you look at sustainability of this industry, I think you need to have a really deep view on how you're able to get to this net zero target that that thankfully the industry has committed to together, and it's not just one leading the other by the nose. It's a commitment across the industry, which is an enormous step forward. But for Ferrovial Airports, we've actually created a Ferrovial Airport Sustainability Index, which is it's 400 indicators over 19 different areas. So this was already developed before I arrived, but it's an indicator that we plug into when we do due diligence. We put the indicators in the model and see how it comes out to show areas we're doing well and areas we're not doing well. So when we go to the board and get the obvious question about the ESG performance or where are the issues, we can actually have a clear data point to say this is where we're dragging, we're not doing well, and this is plans to improve it, and this is years we are doing well. But without those indicators, it's difficult to sort of put the finger in the air and go, yeah, it feels all right. And what we also use this these indicators for as well, or this index for, is for existing airports and how we can look at improving them. So it's having that sophistication around sustainability rather than, you know, a few fluffy words and saying, yeah, you know, target net zero by 2050. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to be here. It's really genuinely having a plan to deliver on that. So, and I think strategics can have have a more depth and understanding, and to be able to deliver on those challenges than others. So I think it's something that's extremely important for our industry, and it's pleasing to see you know, that we are moving forward, and there is a target, and you know, we've seen, you know, areas of our industry stepping ahead.
Yeah, I imagine it's a resource intensive effort to, you know, with not immediate returns, I suppose. So, you know, to have an organization in a portfolio your size allows you to probably invest in more ways than some others. And do you find that when you think about the size of the portfolio, of like, do you feel like there's a sweet spot where it's big enough to be able to do some of these industry leading things? How do you think about the overall size?
So for airports like Heathrow, you can do those industry leading things, and sustainable aviation fuels is one area in which Heathrow has led the way. So, and for us, it's learning from that and using that and then applying it in a different scale to the other airports. So that's really, it's a massive advantage. But yeah, I think well, you point around, there's no immediate benefit. I think investment committees now realise that you need to have a long-term view on this, because if you don't, your asset can go to naught. And I think the seriousness of our industry, and our industry will not survive without proper progress. And you hear some, you know, the big leaders of an industry, and you hear Michael O'Leary saying that, you know, Ryanair need to adapt, otherwise as well as the whole industry. And when you hear Michael O'Leary talking about that, you go, actually, I think the industry's taken it seriously. So I think we have, and it can't just be words, it needs to be a plan. And that's why we came up with this this index to actually articulate what we need to do specifically on both, not just the environmental side, but the social and governance, to bring our assets to a level we think is at a sustainable improvement level. So, and that's not just airports, by the way. I mean, we do that across the piece, from roads and energy and construction. And it's something that, you know, as a group, we're committed to. So it's not, this is not just an airports thing, and it's not organisation wide. It is absolutely something that is fundamental to the group.
Yeah, I suspect you're right. We're going to look back in a few years and at that O'Leary as a turning point. Luke, I believe there's other sessions at GAD that are going to get into detail around electric aviation and vertical takeoff and stuff. But maybe just on the related to sustainability and how you see that. I think one of the remarkable things is Ferrovial's been sort of a leader so far in that sort of nascent segment of the sector. How do you think about that, both as a budding technology, but also sort of fitting into some of the themes you just mentioned?
So vertiports, when I joined Ferrovial and understood that, you know, we were keen on this segment, I was a bit taken aback. I thought this sounds more VC, private equity like, but I think it's not about that. It's a genuine belief that this is the future of urban air mobility. And what is urban air mobility? In the first wave, it's, you know, a range of 25 to 150 miles. So you're not really competing with domestic or regional flight. You're more, in the first wave, you're really competing with cars and taking cars off the road. But the future, the longer term future, is genuine competition to reduce, you know, travel by air, probably, you know, domestic, regional. Long ways off, but that's where it's heading to. It's, you know, it's electrification, it's vertical takeoff and landing powered by batteries. Kevin Cox will be at GAD and doing a presentation. He's our expert and an absolute passionate enthusiast with his strong team based in Dallas around that, and we are at the forefront of that. But I think that what that reflects is, as an organisation, as Ferrovial, we absolutely believe in the industry, and it is a nascent industry, and it's a startup business supporting a startup business. There's challenges. There's no question. There's challenges. There's a lot of regulation that needs to be ticked off. We are focusing on sites and focusing on agreements and so forth, which we're moving in earnest with. But we're absolutely sure this will be a success in the near future, and we want to be at the forefront of it.
Yeah. Well, Luke, you certainly have a lot going on, from one of the biggest investments in the world going on with a new terminal development to a really interesting leisure airport in Turkey and this eVTOL and segment and so forth. So, how do you see the next year or two? Are you just going to focus on what you have? Certainly wouldn't blame you, but do you see there being new opportunities even beyond
that? Yeah, I think there will be. I think the existing theme of pipeline being small, which is almost non-existent in terms of the public options, whether they're secondaries or privatizations. I think that will be very, very low in the next few years. But that doesn't mean there's deals not happening. I mean, there's deals happening now, but they're just sort of happening under the radar. And I think largely because I think if a willing seller, is probably considering to sell and doesn't want to have a failed bid, but wants to explore options, buyers are out there asking the question. So, you think about the deals that have happened over the last 12 months, and Sydney Airport's an example of that. That was probably several years in the making, but that's it's an opportunistic approach, and Terminal 1, JFK Terminal 1 is similar in that sense, and Delamar was a negotiated deal. So look, there's others, but for us as an organisation, absolutely, we're still looking at opportunities and working them through. So it's not sit back and put your feet up and see how things go. There's obviously a hell of a lot of work to do with transitioning these two assets and getting them to deliver. But at the same time, our corporate development team, headed by David Kenny, who will also be there, is working flat out at the moment on the next opportunity.
Excellent, Luke. Well, it's going to be exciting to watch over the next few years. It's really impressive what you've done in just 16 months, and it's an impressive organization. And I think we're all from the industry excited to watch to see what comes next.
Yeah. And thanks, Shawn. I'm sorry I can't make it. I have to be on the other side of the world, but I'll definitely look forward to seeing everyone at GAD in 2023.
Very exciting.